Hey everyone, in this video we're going to look at chapter 3 of book 1 from De Bello Gallico. So this is continuing the story in the Gallic Wars, the beginning of the Gallic Wars really, with the Helvetian Campaign. So you might remember we've seen this map before, but the area of Gaul, which is basically modern day France, right, that we're really focusing on, is the area right in the middle of sort of the Alps, right, in Switzerland. This is where the Helvetii live. So you want to think about this as we work our way through, because remember, the geography is a really important part of what's happening here, and Caesar spent the first two books kind of explaining it to you. But the big thing that we've been talking about is that the Helvetii are boxed in. You have the Alps to the southeast, to the northwest, you have the Jura mountain range, again, part of the Alps, and up to the northeast, you have the Rhine River and the Germans who keep attacking them. There's nowhere for the Helvetii to go, right? And the one option they do have is to the southwest, but you have the Romans there, right? Near Lake Geneva, this is where the Roman province kind of keeps them hemmed in on that southern side. So that was really what we've been talking about for the first two books, and now we're going to get into the whole migration of the Helvetii and when they actually try to move out of this region. And you're going to see how Caesar describes it, and we're going to talk about again the manipulation that's really happening here. So as we dive in, remember, you want to read your way through this. If you can find a commentary or grammar, that would be a big help. You want to read it and then do the read and reread method. So if you can read it, note any vocab or grammar that you're stuck on, then go back, right? Fill in all those blanks and read it a second or a third time. The idea is by the third, maybe second, third time, however many times it takes, you should be able to read this without too much trouble and without having to live in a dictionary and constantly look up grammar ideas. So let's dive in. And like I said, your translation doesn't have to be exactly like mine, but if it's on the right track, you can feel pretty good that you know kind of what's going on with the Latin. So it starts with this. You have his rebus adducti et auctoritate rather, orgetoribus permoti constitueron ea quae ad proficiscendum pertinerent comparare, iumentorum et carorum quam maximum numerum coimere, dot, 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 right? So the sentence keeps going. But it starts with his rebus adducti, right? So adducti is a perfect passive participle. So you're saying having been influenced by these things, right? All the things that Caesar talked about in books, or in chapters 1 and 2, rather. And having been moved, right, per moti, moved by the authority of orgetorix, right, the auctoritate orgetoribus. So both of these ablatives are functioning as like an ablative of mean because you have passive voice verbs, specifically perfect passive participles. So moved by his authority, they decided, meaning the Helvetii, right? That's the missing word here. They decided, constituerant, they decided to comparare, to prepare. So you have this series of basically infinitives that are going with what they decided to do. So the first thing they decided to do was comparare, to buy, or to prepare rather, to prepare ea, those things, right? It's neuter substantive, right? So those things which, and here we kind of have a relative clause of characteristic, right? Which is why you have the subjunctive pertinerent. It's describing the things is one way to think about it. So it's saying they decided to prepare those things which pertinerent, they pertain, and again, it's imperfect subjunctive, pertain to the proficiscendum, to the departing, right? So proficiscendum is a gerund. So you're taking the verb to depart, which is deponent, and you're making it into a noun. So it really means like the departing, or maybe even the departure is one way to do it. So they decide to prepare those things which pertain to the departure is one way to work your way through that. Okay. And they decided, right, coimere, to buy. What are they buying? Numerum, or maximum numerum, right? So the greatest number. The quam there is functioning to mean as possible. So you're saying as great, or the greatest number as possible of iumentorum, pack animals, et carorum, and wagons. So they go out and they buy the greatest possible amount they can of pack animals, right? Think donkeys or something like that, right? And of wagons, carorum. Then the sentence continues. You have sementes quam maximas facere, ut in itinere copia frumenti supeteret, cum proximis civitatibus pacem et amicitiam confirmare. So they're deciding, and that's the key phrase from the previous slide. They decided to prepare all this stuff, to buy the pack animals, and now they decided to facere, to make. Sementes quam maximus, again, it means the greatest sementes, the greatest sowing, meaning planting seeds, the greatest sowing as possible. So that you have the purpose clause of why they're doing this, right? So that on the journey in itinerary, an abundance, a copia, right? An abundance of frumenti, it's genitive. Usually translated corn, it means like think like grain, corn. It's an idea of like food. Is basically the idea. So that an abundance of food or corn, supeteret, it might be at hand, is one way to translate this. So this again is the imperfect subjunctive because you have the purpose clause, the ut clause, and it's the verb supetto, which means to like be on hand or be sufficient is kind of the idea. So it's saying that they want to make sure that on the journey they have enough. They have this abundance of food, right? Of frumenti, of corn. Okay. So first, they again they prepare all their stuff. They buy the pack animals and the carriages. Now they're making a great sowing so that they have enough food. And the last thing they do, the last sort of complementary infinitive here, is they confirmare. They strengthen. Right? They decided to strengthen. You're saying, strengthen or to make is kind of another way to do it. Pacem et amicitiam, peace and friendship with their proximis civitatibus, the nearby states. Right? Meaning their neighbors. Okay, so this whole sentence, these two slides, is a big connection of different complementary infinitives, the things that they decided to do. Okay, then it continues. You have ad eas res conficiendas biennium sibi satis esse duxerunt in tertium annum profectionem lege confirmat. So you're saying for these things, right? Ad eas res, for these things, conficiendas here is a gerundive, right? I almost said gerund. It's actually a gerundive. And you can tell because it's functioning as an adjective. So the gerundive is going to match case, number, and gender, whereas a gerund doesn't because it's a noun. In terms of your translating, it's describing the things, right? It's kind of one way to think about it. In terms of your translation, you can almost think of it as just being a gerund. What it literally is, right? The gerundive is a future passive participle. So it really means for those things going to be accomplished, I think is kind of one way you can think of it. But you can almost translate it as for these things to be accomplished or to be completed is really one way to do it, kind of the easiest way to do it. So it's saying for these things to be completed, right, the completion of these things, duxerunt, they considered, they thought. This is an indirect statement, right, because we don't know exactly what they considered or what they thought. We're getting the secondhand report of it. So it is the verb to lead, really, but in this case, it really is more like thinking, right? So they considered biennium, 2 years, right? To be enough, satis esse. So another way to say it is they considered 2 years were enough, right? Is kind of one way to be it, for themselves, right? Or they considered to themselves that that 2 years would be enough. So it's saying they really needed 2 years to complete the or 2 years for the completion of these things, meaning to get everything ready and make peace and buy all this stuff, they thought that they would need 2 years, right? Then you have in tertium annum, in the third year, they declare, confirmant, they declare a profectionem, a departure, lege, by law, meaning they kind of set it down in their law saying, in the third year, we are going to depart. Okay, so all of this is showing the planning the Helvetii are doing to leave their land. But this should make you pause for a minute and ask, like, what is going on here, right? So let's just backtrack a little bit. We saw in chapter 2 a bunch of different phrases. This one, right? Caesar says they're talking about how easy it would be because they surpass everyone in terms of virtue to take command of all Gaul. And in this quote, we had it would be again, it would they weren't easily able to wage war on their neighbors. This is when he's describing where they live. And here he's saying that the men were bellandi cupidi magno, right? They were desirous of war and they were affected by sadness because they couldn't fight, right? Here again in chapter 2, it talks about how the men were seeking the glory of war, right? Gloria belli, right? And their borders were too narrow, right? They're too narrow for how much glory they want. And now all of a sudden we just got this line where it says they went and made peace with their neighbors. What's happening here, right? This should make you pause and think for a minute. Caesar just described how warlike these people are, and now he's saying they made peace with their neighbors. This should get you to pause and realize that something screwy is happening here, right? You're being manipulated. It doesn't make sense that you're saying they're so warlike and their goal is to conquer everyone. If that was the goal, why would you go out and make peace with your neighbors, right? There's something not quite adding up here. And to me, anyway, this feels like a slip where Caesar's trying to manipulate. He's giving some facts, and it's like we need to uncover the truth. It feels like the truth of it is they probably did go and make peace with their neighbors, and they probably weren't out to conquer everyone, right? So you're seeing this odd contradiction in Caesar's report, and it's worth thinking about. Like, what is the goal of the Helvetii? What are they actually doing here? Caesar's trying to tell you they're out to conquer everyone, but here they're buying pack animals and they're out making peace with their neighbors. It seems kind of contradictory, right, on what's actually happening. Then we continue, and you have a very familiar phrase. You have ad eas res, conficiendas, right? The same phrase we just saw, same gerundive. Then you have orgitorex delegator. So for the completion of these things, or again, you might say for these things to be completed, right? Either way you want to do it. Orgetorix is chosen, right? Delegator, right? So this is the famous Orgetorix, the leader of the Helvetii. He's chosen. Okay, so he enters the story again. Now you have is sibi legationem ad civitate suscepit. So he undertook, suscepit. It kind of has the meaning of choosing, but he undertook for himself, sibi, legationem, the envoy to the civitates, to the states. So this is saying he basically chose himself to be the envoy. He undertook for himself the envoy, meaning the delegation of the ambassadors, basically, to the city states. Again, an interesting choice of words here from Caesar. He picked himself to be the envoy. That seems a little bit sketchy, right? And it is purposely sketchy by Caesar. He wants you to think that Orgetorix, said, "Don't worry, I've got it. I'll take all this power and I'll go talk to our neighbors." Hold that thought, and we'll kind of see what happens later. But this is an interesting choice of words from Caesar. Then we continue of in eo itinere, persuadet castico, catamantaloides filio, sequano, cuius pater regnum in sequanis multos annos obtenuerat, et a senatu populi Romani amicos appellatus erat, ut regnum in civitate sua occuparet, quod pater ante habuerit. Very long sentence, okay? So on this journey, in eo itinerary, meaning on the journey to visit all the neighboring states and make peace with them, right? You have he persuades, meaning Orgetorix persuades. Now, the verb to persuade goes with the dative. So it's saying he persuades Casticus, who's described as the filio, right? The son of Catamantaloides. What a name, right? So this is his father. And it's Casticus, a Sequanian, right? Sequano, right? He's a member of the Sequani tribe. And now we have a reference to Catamantaloides, whose father, meaning Casticus's father, in other words, Catamantaloides, tough name, whose father held, obtenuerat, he had held the regnum, the kingship, among the Sequani, in Sequanis, right? It's just ablative, means like among them. Multos annos, for many years, right? You have the duration of time with the accusative there. So for many years, Casticus's father had been the king, right, of the Sequani, okay? And not only that, and he, meaning the father, Catamantaloides, he had been called appellatus erat, it's pluperfect passive, so he had been called amicus, right, friend, by the Senatu Populi Romani, by the Senate of the Roman people. Now, this is a specific technical term. Friend of the Senate, right, an amicus, is not just a random comment here. That is a very specific title given by the Roman Senate, and I'd encourage you to look it up, right, and kind of what it means. But it is an official title that means you're an ally, you're supported by the Senate, right? So that's not something that comes lightly. The point you want to get here is that Casticus's father is very close to the Romans. Okay, then they called him that, and again, you have to go all the way back now. You're saying Orgetorix persuaded Casticus so that, revenue clause here, right? And this is all kind of indirect commands, so that he might occupare it, he might seize, right? Again, it's imperfect subjunctive, right? That he was seizing, or he might take the regnum, the kingship, in his own city-state, in his own civitate, right? In his own state. So it's saying that Orgetorix persuaded Casticus that he should be the king of the Sequani. Why is he doing this? Because his father had been king, right? His father had been king, and oh, by the way, his father was a friend of Rome. And it's the kingship which, so quote is referring to the regnum, the kingdom or kingship which his father, pater, right, had held before, ante habuere. So the idea here, and again, there's a lot of kind of phrases happening, but at the end of the day, Orgetorix is convincing Casticus that he should take over the kingship of the Sequani, right? And it's a title that his father had. So he's saying you should be the king. Okay. Then you have, and again, by the way, notice how it's saying that he should take over, and his father had been a friend of Rome. It's coming off here, the manipulation. It comes off as if Casticus is not a friend of Rome, and that he's plotting something with Orgetorix, right? Whether or not that's the truth, we don't know, right? But that's how it definitely comes off. Then you have itemque dumnorigi haeduo fratri diviaci, qui eo tempore principatum incivitate obtinebat, ac maxime plebi acceptus erat, ut idem conaretur persuadet eique filiam suam in matrimonium dat. So, and also, itemque, and also, he persuaded, is kind of the missing idea. He persuaded Dumnorix, the Idui, right? The Iduan, you might say. Dumnorix, the brother of Diviacus, right? Fratri Diviaci. So the brother of Diviacus, who, it's talking about Diviacus, who at that time, eo tempore, right? Obtinebat was holding the principatum, the leadership in his state, in civitate, right? So this is the brother of the current leader, okay? And not only that, so and he had been accepted, acceptus erat, very much maxime by the people. So Diviacus is very well connected, right, to the people. He is their leader, and he's been accepted, right? And Orgetorix goes and talks to the brother. So he persuaded the brother that, I think it's going to be so that he might try. Again, the persuadet is really going back to Dumnorix in the beginning. He persuaded Dumnorix so that he might try conaretur. It's an indirect command going with ut there, so that he might try the idem, the same thing. Okay, meaning he should take over. Okay, and the que on aque means and, right? And he gives dot to him, right? A is dative. So he gives to him filiam suam, his own daughter, in matrimonium, in marriage. So there's a lot to unpack here. But what Caesar is saying is that Orgetorix went to these two states, the Sequani and the Aedui, and instead of talking to the leaders, he talked to sort of the second in command, right? The son in the first part when he's talking to Casticus, and the brother, Dumnorix. It's all coming off as very, very shady, right? We don't know exactly what's going on here and where the truth of it, but Caesar's saying, look what they're doing. They're making this pact, this conspiracy, where the brother Dumnorix and the son Casticus are going to overthrow the current governments, and they're going to join with the Helvetii. And to make this all work, Orgetorix is even giving up his daughter in marriage to Dumnorix. Okay, so the effect of all this is it really comes off as a plan or a plot, right? Against the Romans. That's the idea, right? These people are friendly to the Romans, and look what Orgetorix is doing in the background, right? Keep that in mind. There's something kind of interesting being described here by Caesar. And again, the grammar is a little tricky because he's got so many clauses happening, but if you just take it one piece at a time and follow kind of the flow of it, you'll see what Caesar's doing here, right? You'll be able to figure it out. Then you keep going. And again, you have per facile factu esse, illis probat conata perficere propteria quod ipse suae civitatis imperium obtenturus esse. Okay, so here it's saying he probat, he shows, right, or he showed, you might say, or he shows. Okay, he shows that. And again, it's sort of this indirect statement because we weren't actually there and we don't have direct quotes, but he shows that it was, right, or you might even say to do this. Factu is something called a supine. So the supine, because you have per facile, easy or very easy, you can translate as just to, right, to do, or you can even translate it as like with respect to, is kind of one way to do it. But you're saying that he shows that it was per facile, very easy to do, right? These things, to perficere conata, to complete the attempts is really what he's going on. Conata is a perfect passive participle, right? It's coming from the verb to try, so it really means like the attempts, right? Or the things they're attempting, having been attempted. So it's saying that he shows them that to do this, right, in respect to these deeds, was per facile. It was very easy. So he's convincing him, saying, "Don't worry about it. It's going to be very, very easy to accomplish all these things." And Elis means for them, meaning for these men, for Casticus and Dumnorix. He's saying, don't worry about it. It's going to be very easy to do these, to complete these things, because propteria. Now, the propteria quote is sort of a redundancy, right? It literally means because, or on account, on this account, because, or on account of this, because, right? This is just a redundancy. You can just translate it as because, okay? But it's saying because ipse, there's your subject, he himself. Then you have what we call the future periphrastic here with obtenturus esse. So what you're looking at here is a future participle, obtenturus, going with sum, right? In this case, it's imperfect subjunctive, right? Because you have indirect statement going on. When you do this, it's called periphrastic, which means like talking roundabout, right? It's a Greek word. It's sort of an indirect way of talking. What it literally says is it would be or he would be going to obtain is kind of what it says if you were to translate it literally. But you can just think of this as saying he would obtain. That's kind of an easier way to translate it. So it's saying it's going to be easy for the two men to take over their respective governments because he himself, meaning Orgetorix, would obtain, right, obtenturus esse, he would obtain imperium, power of his own state, sui civitatis. So he's saying, don't worry about it because Orgetorix, I am going to take over the Helvetii, right, and get all this control. And you guys are going to have an easier time taking over your respective states. And together they're making this conspiracy, right? They're going to take over their different governments. Then it continues here. And we get this last line. You have non esse dubium quintotius Galliae plurimum Helvetii possent, se suis copiis suoque exercitu, illis regna conciliatorum confirma. So it's saying, is also saying that he was not in doubt, right? Non esse dubium, literally, like he was not in doubt. Again, it's this indirect statement. That, quin, is really a way to translate that. That the Helvetii, now this is an idiom to say plurimum possent. One way to translate it, a lot of grammar says, is that the Helvetii would have very much, plurimum, very much power. So the posse part can be translated as like to have power. So plurimum possent is a way of saying that they would have, right, would have very much power of all Gaul, totius Gallia. And then it continues this last sort of indirect statement of what's going to happen, right? You have that the se suis copies, right? The se is really him, so it's saying he confirmat, he confirms. Again, we're dealing with a speaking verb, but we don't have a direct quote, so you're looking at indirect statement. He confirms that he, right, say, that he conciliatorum, right here, is the same situation you saw before. It's really conciliatorum esse, right? It's this idea that he would, you've got this future, again, the indirect discourse was sort of this future infinitive happening here. That he would secure is kind of one way to translate it, right? Conciliatorum, that he would secure the regna, right? Kingdoms. So again, this is just neuter plural of regnum. So he would secure kingdoms, illis, for them, meaning for Casticus and for Dumnorix. How's he going to do this? Suis copies, with his own troops, and suo exercitu, with his own army. So he's telling them, don't worry, I'm going to help you. Once I take control of the Helvetii, I'm going to help you guys come overthrow your governments and take control of your respective states, the Aedui, right, and the Sequani. And again, this last piece is indirect statement being kind of set up by confirma. So now that we've gone through, and I know there's a lot there, and it's getting a little trickier, I'd say, than the first two chapters. But we've stopped it with the geography lesson. Now we're actually diving into it. There's some things you want to think about. So here's just some questions to get you moving as you go. So you want to think about the contradictory account of the Helvetii. What are they doing? Are they conquering everyone? If they're conquering everyone, why are they making peace? Right? What exactly is happening? What's Orgetorix doing? Okay. He got elected as the leader, basically, right? He was chosen, but now he's sending himself as an envoy. Why would he send himself, right? Is he making peace? It doesn't feel like it. The way Caesar set it up, he's supposed to be making peace with the Sequani and the Aedui, but they're talking about overthrowing their father and brother, right? So, in other words, taking over the Sequani and the Aedui states. But the interesting thing is that they actually don't attack the Helvetii later on. So it seems like he might have actually made peace with them, right? But what was the reason why? Is it to overthrow the government or just making peace? This is the question. He keeps calling this, Caesar in the third bullet point I'm asking, he keeps calling this conspiracy, right, of the elite. And he's showing you that. The implication here is that the only people involved are Orgetorix, Casticus, and Dunorix, the elite. What about the common people, right? Well, later on, Caesar's excuse for taking out the Helvetii is going to be they were attacking the people, right? Our allies, the Sequani, the Aedui. Look what's going on. We can't have the Helvetii attacking them. So Caesar has to intervene, right? But is that really what's going on here? Or what's happening? Is that the reason Caesar's telling you? It's kind of hard to understand and figure out what's going on. And remember, Caesar wasn't there. So how does he know any of this stuff? You also want to look at the description of Orgetorix. Again, he chose himself to be the envoy. That's very shady. Why wouldn't you send someone else? Well, it kind of feels like you're doing this in secret. You don't want people to know what's going on. And the biggest question of all is do you believe Caesar? Does he give any evidence? We talked a little bit in the previous videos, like, is this history or storytelling? Usually he'd be able to say, like, yeah, I heard from this person that. There's no evidence of where he got this information from. He's talking about secret meetings that only involve three men. How does he know this? Right? That's the big question. And you want to think if the end result is Caesar is going to attack the Helvetii, wouldn't this be a convenient reason to do it? Right? It's not just that the Helvetii were looking for peace. No, no, they were on the warpath. They were coming to conquer everyone. And how do we know that? Well, look, they were going to overthrow the government. You have these elite men taking everything over. These are all questions that you need to unpack, right? Because at the end of the day, we can't be sure of what exactly is happening behind the scenes. We have Caesar's account, but we know the end result is Caesar is going to attack the Helvetii. He's going to basically wipe them out, right? That's the whole point. They're going to fight, and so you need to unpack of what's happening here. Are they a peaceful group trying to migrate? Are they an invading army? Is Orgetorix overthrowing governments? Like, these are all questions that need to be unpacked. But you can see Caesar is very deliberately trying to set you up to believe what he's telling you. This is a conspiracy. They were going to take over all Gaul. They were going to attack our allies. There's a lot of things that they were going to do. And then it's up to us to try to unpack what actually happened, which is not an easy thing to do. Okay. So hopefully this made some sense. Again, there's some trickier grammar in here. I just went through it a little quickly to get you on the right track. If there's anything you're not sure of, you should pause the video and go back and be like, what is a future paraphrastic? What's going on with this use of the subjunctive? You can find all those resources. Let me know. I'll point you in the right direction. But you want to be able to read through it and try to get the general idea and then fill in the blanks. Okay. And as long as at the end of the day, your understanding matches roughly, not that mine's perfect, what's going on here, in terms of my translation, you can feel pretty good that you're on the right track. Again, your best friend will probably be read and reread. Read through it once, try to unpack all the tough parts, and keep reading it until you don't need to live in a dictionary or constantly be looking up grammar terms. Okay? And as you're going, again, maybe the second time you read through, think about these questions because there is definitely manipulation and persuasion happening here. And you want to understand that as you read, right? That gives context to the whole thing. So make sure you're thinking about that as you go. Good luck with it. If you have any questions, let me know. But otherwise, keep at it. And hopefully, it'll get easier the more you do it. Good luck.